Support for WERU comes from the Bucksport Enterprise, a locally owned weekly newspaper covering news and views in Bucksport, Orland, Verona Island, and beyond. Available on newsstands every Thursday.
You're listening to WERU-FM 89.9 in Blue Hill, 99.9 in Bangor, and streaming at weru.org. Stay tuned for the WERU News Report.
And this is the WERU News Report for Wednesday, February 18th, 2015. I'm Amy Browne. On today's show, we'll be following up on several Penobscot Bay-related issues we've been reporting on. Ron Huber and Sheila Dassett of Friends of Penobscot Bay will be joining us for that and to take your calls a little later in the program. We also have a report from Naomi Schalit of the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting that will give you a clear idea of what you're up against when you try to have some influence over your state legislators. But first, last week we told you that WERU's Board of Directors was considering divesting the station's endowment fund from fossil fuels. The board voted on the issue Monday night, and station manager Matt Murphy is joining me here today. And as always, board president John Greenman is here. He engineers the program, and the two of them have an announcement. So welcome back to the news report, Matt and John.
Thank you. It's always nice to be here.
Thanks.
We're going to let you make the big announcement.
Well, and I have here an announcement, written announcement that we worked on earlier. So if it sounds like I'm reading something, I am.
It's rolled down from a big scroll.
Yes.
And
it's popping up on Facebook as we speak, and will be on our website at some point in time in the near future. The WERU Board of Directors decided on February 16th, 2015, at its monthly meeting, to invest the organization's $60,000 endowment in a socially responsible manner, a decision that the board believes reflects the values of WERU. The two resolutions that passed unanimously are as follows. Quote, the WERU Board of Directors endorses the concept of socially responsible investing for its endowment funds, end quote. And then the second resolution, quote, the WERU Board of Directors requests that Maine Community Foundation transfer our endowment funds from their general investing pool to their socially responsible pool that they now offer client organizations, end quote. The board is grateful to all the listeners who spoke up on this matter and those who attended board meetings, those who emailed WERU or called in during our two recent WERU programs that addressed this, the WERU Review a couple weeks ago, and then the news report last week. The board is also grateful to the Maine Community Foundation for offering a socially responsible investing option that does include fossil fuel divestment in which WERU can place its endowment. If you have any questions about this, you can call me, Matt Murphy, at 469-6600 here at the station, or or email matt@weru.org.
Great. And John?
Well, just a couple of things, and I want to be brief because we did talk about this last week, and it is old news now that it's announced. I wanted to thank John Amring, our treasurer, for taking the lead on finding out the parameters that we were dealing with, for instructing and educating the board on the permutations and combinations and realities in many people's minds about investments and dangers, et cetera, et cetera. We went in wide-eyed. We went in philosophically, we think, in the right direction, and we made a decision, and we hope that ERU folks out there will support us in that, because we're just one big family as far as I'm concerned.
And I guess, I certainly want to say Karen Mary's daughter was on the program last week with us, and thanks to you, Karen, too, for your information from 350.org. We appreciate that.
350 Maine were the ones who originally brought to the board's attention that this was an issue and an option.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. All right.
And we do have a small endowment, so anyone who would, I can't pass up this fundraising opportunity, anyone who would like to contribute to our endowment and make it bigger, you can give me a call here at the station.
Now you know your money is going to a fund that is not invested in fossil fuels. Great.
So thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Great.
Amy.
Thank you, Matt. And so you heard it here first. WERU Board of Directors voted Monday night to invest in a fund that is divested from fossil fuels, and joining University of Maine that recently divested from coal, and also other colleges across the state and around the country that are either doing this or considering doing it.
I did want to just add one thing, because it isn't just divesting of fossil fuels. I'm sorry, I should have jumped in with my name.
Okay.
The fund that we're looking at, that we will be transferring funds to, is actually a very, very widespread fund. In other words, it has filters that cover a huge number of areas.
It goes beyond the fossil fuel divestment, right?
So that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of people are also interested in, say, nuclear power or gambling or alcohol.
Tobacco,
a lot of these things are covered. So if you want more information, we can provide it. The Maine Community Foundation can provide it also. So
great.
One way or the other. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for that news. All right, so moving on. So you call your state representative complaining about the lack of decent internet connection in your area. Or maybe you organize a petition drive and you show up at their office with a stack of signatures calling for a change. How much of their time and attention do you get in response? And some of you out there actually know the answer to this. You've actually done this. This isn't a rhetorical question. But what if you were able to put them up for a few days in one of the most expensive hotels in the state and feed them steak dinners? You may think those things only happen in Washington, but it's actually exactly how Time Warner bought 2 days of Maine lawmakers' time last month. Naomi Schalit, an investigative journalist with the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting, learned about this swanky meeting in Cape Elizabeth and went to work exposing the details.
It was held at a Cape Elizabeth resort called the Inn by the Sea. It was billed by Time Warner as their winter policy conference. The resort has rooms that range from just under $200 to actually $500 and more. And the legislators were invited both to come for a session on Thursday evening that included dinner, and we understand steak was served, and then they could spend the night and go to sessions for much of the following day, Friday. Not all of the legislators who went spent the night, although some of them did, and they were served breakfast and then had a number of panels the next day. We're told that, and we see from the materials which we got that were distributed at the conference, that much of the conference was devoted to Time Warner's concern about broadband, municipal broadband expanding here in Maine. And they had one presentation from some law professors from New York Law School that basically trashed the idea of municipal broadband, saying that government-sponsored broadband isn't going to help residents and businesses get faster broadband speeds. And then they had a presentation by a well-known pollster in the state about how members of the public really did not want to pay for any municipal expansion of broadband.
I'm assuming that you didn't find out about this because in interest of transparency, they invited the media to come to it.
No, we were not invited. We did find out about it. It's not clear whether they invited all legislators or a select group. We have heard. We asked every single legislator whether they went to this event, and many of them said to us that they weren't invited. So it looks like there may have been some selection. We did call. We found a picture from Twitter that showed a panel of people at the event on the second day. So we knew that those people had gone. And that was legislative leadership, but it's been like pulling teeth to try to find out from the rest of the legislature whether they went to this event or not.
And you had a large number of them that never responded to you sent them 2 emails and followed up with a phone call, and they didn't
Exactly.
return?
So 54 of the 188 legislators, normally there are 189, but one legislator has resigned within the last, 6 weeks, Dickerson from Rockland. So it was 188 legislators, and 134 answered, but after 2 emails and 1 telephone message, 54 lawmakers did not respond.
We'll touch a little bit more on transparency in just a minute, but of the people who did attend, it sounded like some of them had some reservations about spending the night, so some of them attended but didn't accept some of the what would be considered gifts, depending on how much they charge for the rooms, and then others who didn't attend at all because it seems, at least in some cases, they were concerned about appearances, maybe even more so than ethics of the whole thing. They thought that it would just not appear to be ethical.
Yeah, I think you've very clearly explained the range of responses. We had people like Senator Kim Rosen of Bucksport, who said to us through a spokesperson that because broadband is an important issue to her constituents, and I'm quoting her spokesperson, and her constituents would benefit from her having as much information as possible on the topic. That's why she went. She also brought her husband, who is the commissioner of the Maine Department of Administrative and Financial Services, Richard Rosen, former senator, essentially head of the state's budget. And then you've got someone like Jeff Evangelos at the other end entirely who did not go. He's an independent legislator from Friendship and said to us, this just adds to the cynical attitude when legislators are going to one of the most expensive hotels in Maine for an all-expenses-paid junket, and we're supposed to believe that Time Warner isn't going to be looking for something in return. And then you had someone like Eric Jorgensen, a state rep from Portland, who didn't attend and said, you have to look at these things very carefully. It just seemed a little over the top. And then, I will say there were no comments from Time Warner other than a couple of paragraphs they sent us when we did the first of these two stories, and they refused to answer any specific questions.
Did you get a sense as you were talking to people that this type of sort of expensive lobbying type conference is a common thing in the state?
There are a couple of overnight events sponsored by interest groups that have been going on actually for a long time. For the last 15 years, the Maine State Chamber of Commerce has had an overnight event for about 24 legislators, most recently at Sunday River. And that's where the Chamber brings a lot of its members, so people representing diverse interests, to this event, and then has, looks like, I think, a couple of dozen legislators. And they just talk, says Connors. He said, all these issues the legislature deals with, very few of them are simple unless you want to name a bird or a dog. And they really benefit from having as much involvement and discussion as possible. And it's very hard to get that opportunity at the State House, is what he said. He says there are no conditions, no expectations as to whether you're expected to do something, only that the participants leave there having had a healthy discussion. There's also a Maine Development Foundation trip that takes legislators on buses all across the state, and they go meet with business folks, farmers, Chamber of Commerce, you name it, folks all around the state, have a dinner, breakfast, etc., and learn a lot about economic development in the state. People I talked to seem to feel that there really was a difference between those kinds of events and what happened with Time Warner, which was very much more out of the public eye and much more luxurious. There's also really, as Representative Mark Dion, a Portland legislator, said, these meals are kind of how Augusta works, because any day pretty much during the session you can go into the State House and find an advocacy group holding a breakfast over in the State House cafeteria in the back room, where they serve breakfast and coffee and muffins and talk about the things they're interested in, and often have citizen lobbyists come to those events. You have events at the Senator in windowless rooms for the Maine, association of whatever, who invite legislators, and they get, chafing dish scrambled eggs and an hour or so of a presentation. And this goes on all the time. I think there were two things that made this Time Warner event stand out. It was the degree of luxury. It's not a windowless room in the Senator in Augusta. It's a luxury resort in Cape Elizabeth. And it was the fact that Time Warner has a lot of interest at stake right now in this legislative session, with a lot of bills that have the word broadband in their name having been submitted.
So what limits are in place to make sure that there isn't undue influence? And I know in this instance in particular, some of what's put into place to make sure there's some element of transparency also was not working very well. The people involved were not registered as lobbyists at the time, so that's going to limit some of the information there's access to. How do the checks and balances, how are they supposed to work in situations like this?
Well, I think that if we had not found out about this event, the public would never have known about it. This event, it included meals, a steak dinner, but these kinds of free meals don't need to be disclosed because the legislature has decided they are not considered gifts. Meals as part of an informational presentation are not a gift, is exactly what the head of the Maine Ethics Commission told me. So all those events that these guys go to, as long as there is an informational presentation, the meal does not count as a gift. Then, if a legislator is put up for the night by Time Warner or anyone else, state law says the lodging wouldn't need to be disclosed by the legislator either unless it was worth more than $300. So if you were given something by lobbyists or, somebody from an advocacy group that is less than $300, it is automatically defined by the legislature as not a gift. So under the state's definition, the legislators who got more expensive rooms did get a gift. They'll have to disclose it. But anybody who got a room that was, worth $299.99 will not. And then, let's say the guys who got $300 or more worth of a room have to report it. Well, you won't find that out until next year in February of 2016. That's when, more than a year after the event took place, because that's when lawmakers are required to disclose those gifts in their annual income statements. And then finally, it's possible that a lobbyist for an organization that gives an event like this would have to disclose, because they're required in their monthly reports to provide a list of events and attendees if $250 or more was spent on officials. So actually, the last time Time Warner gave an event like this 2 years ago in 2013, they did report on the event how much it cost and which legislators went. But you only have to report if your company has a lobbyist who's registered during that month. And neither the chief Time Warner lobbyist, a woman named Melinda Poore, nor their paid outside lobbyist, Tom Federley, registered this past January. Federley is registered in February. Poore hasn't registered yet. So it is entirely possible that if neither of them are registered for the month in which this event was given, Time Warner will never need to disclose which legislators got free meals and lodging. So you can see, and then, of course, we decided to contact every single legislator and ask them, and, almost a third of them didn't even answer after multiple attempts. So, if sunlight is the best disinfectant, it's not working very well here.
People can find out more and also maybe learn whether or not their legislator is one that has responded. I wonder if it would make any difference if people contacted their own legislators to ask them if they attended.
Who knows? They can try.
Anything else people should know about this? The latest part of this report is coming out today. People can access it on your website.
PineTreeWatchdog.org. What we do is we give citizens the information they need to hold their government leaders accountable. And this is the kind of story that we just need to keep on doing, because you won't find out about these things unless you got people like us poking around.
And that was Naomi Schalit. She's the publisher and senior reporter for the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting. Late yesterday afternoon, she sent out an update saying, quote, at the last possible minute, Time Warner filed a lobbying registration that appeared online late today, and they will be required to file a report detailing the Cape Elizabeth event by midnight tonight. The full report is on their website, which is pinetreewatchdog.org. And if you go there, you can see the list of who did attend. Some of the folks from this area, within our listening area, include Senator Cushing from Hamden. Representative DeChant from Bath. Scrolling down, Senator Gratwick from Bangor. And Representative Schneck from Bangor, Representative Vero from Brewer, and that's pretty much the folks from this listening area. But again, you can go to pinetreewatchdog.org and see the details. Also on their website today, another breaking story about Governor LePage, who has attempted to interfere with a Human Rights Commission religious discrimination case against Moody's Diner. So pinetreewatchdog.org for that. Moving on to our Penobscot Bay report, and you are listening to the WERU News Report. I'm Amy Browne. John Greenman's here engineering, and we have Ron Huber with us here in the studio. He's with Friends of Penobscot Bay. Welcome, Ron.
Hi, Amy.
And we plan to have joining us by phone shortly also Sheila Dassett, who's also with Friends of Penobscot Bay, as well as the Down East, being the executive director of the Down East Lobstermen's Association. And we'll also be opening the phone lines for your questions. So write this number down. It's 469-0500 if you're local, 469-0500, or you can call toll-free at 1-866
625-9378. WERU News Report, since we moved to this hour-long slot, is an interactive news report, so you can jump in at any point with any questions for our guests in the studio or any information that you have about it that you'd like to share. And we also are hoping to hear from another person that Ron has lined up who is involved with baykeepers, and that's one of the topics we'll be talking about for Penobscot Bay. But I think we may have Sheila on the line. Is that correct?
Yes.
Sheila, are you with us? Thanks for joining us, Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Ron.
So we've got Sheila on one line. That means we've got another phone line open, and we can still take your calls, and Sheila will be able to hear them and answer them by phone. So, feel free to call in despite the fact that we do have a phone guest. I want to start with just quickly an update on the scrap metal dump in Searsport, because we reported on that quite a bit. Last week at their meeting, the planning board gave a conditional approval to the proposal by Greenman Industries to build the scrap metal dump there on Mac Point in Searsport, or actually to use a pad that already exists, a cement pad for a dump that would be a place where they would put the scrap metal before it got shipped out. The controversy is around the company, Greenman Industries. They're a Maine-based company, but they've been operating in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where they had faced over $500,000 in fines from the EPA because of the pollution there. They have tried to blame the pollution on other causes, but they did have significant fines. And then the folks in Portsmouth declined to renew their lease, and they sought a location here in Searsport. So, Ron or Sheila, if either one of you have any comments about this and what this conditional approval means, the conditions basically are going to be that they meet the standards that they say they can about controlling scraps of metal falling off their trucks and puncturing people's tires, and then the dust that comes from these ferrous metals getting in the air and those kinds of things.
Right, and we spoke at the public hearing on this one, and we were very concerned about this bringing a new toxic output into the bay at a time when we're trying to clean it up. It's as if you get some more waste coming in here, just as you're dealing with things over in Stockton Harbor already, and just as the dams are breaking or being circumvented up in the river. Things should be getting better. We don't really want to add another industrial waste source in, but so we let them know that if they do, because you always have to consider that fact, that if they do, then it should be suggest it should be covered just as so there won't be a runoff issue. If water's not percolating through it like a giant steel tea bag, it's not going to be gathering materials and taking it on down there. And as we know, it could be mercury and a lot of things. And
yeah, so they're saying they'll have a closed loop system for dealing with the water.
Well, that sounds fine until you get a heavy rainstorm, and then it's no longer a closed loop. So it's a bit of reassurance that we think that it's probably over justified. Really, the thing is to prevent water getting into the scrap, and whether they just cloak it with geotextile cloth, they cloak with geotextile, or they cap it with the steel shed. They should do that. I
don't think that those were conditions that they were being required to do, though. I think that they said they do a closed-loop water system, and that's what they're and they're going to be tenants of Sprague. They're going to be on the Sprague property. So
they'll be on the Sprague permits also.
Right.
And that's something it's bothersome to me, because there's a Mexican company over at GAC Chemical that has waste products to it, but it's on the GAC one, so it's kind of invisible in a regulatory sense. And I don't know whether this is a new trend among companies to kind of hide one company inside another, or put one inside another, so there's less accountability.
Sheila, do you have any comment about this?
Well, from my standpoint, and I'm sure that the Down East Lobstermen's Association would agree with me, it's that it isn't that we're against Searsport having, industry. I know that there's a lot of people there that need jobs, especially now with the mill closing. But it just seems that everything that is proposed at this time is kind of a sticky wicket as far as environmental and the water. At a time that we're really looking at the the marine industry side of this and trying to make sure that the Penobscot Bay is safe for the marine life. It seems like we've had a lot of things like this, being thrown at us. And again, it's not that we're against this progress, but there's a lot to be considered before these things become approved to keep it safe.
Do either one of you have a sense of what the DEP's role is in this now? Do they do another review of things, or does this just get umbrellaed under Sprague?
Well, whether they're doing it under Sprague or for Grimmel, yes, they will have the results of testing, of doing those tests. If they're not going to do them, then this is off. I know that the planning board's not going to be okay with it not being pre-tested and then the later test committed to it. So I think that DEP, which is always a challenge under the Aho administration of the department, needs to be watched rather closely on this.
Patricia Aho being a former lobbyist who actually worked for the company that Pierce Atwood, which is providing the lawyer for Grimmel, who's making this proposal, who was recommending that it be sent back to the DEP.
It's all one
little
little family there.
Yeah.
And I met her first, I guess, in 1994 when we were on an oil terminal task force setting up new rules there, and I thought this lady is smarter than the rest of the room combined, just about. I was really impressed. And then, I could see how she was pushing that industry point of view. And of course, we managed to prevail in some ways of on the ecological side of where you cite these things, not just anywhere.
Well, one of the things at the planning board meeting, and I wasn't at this past one this month, they had a conflict here at the station, but the meeting before that Bruce Probert, the planning board chair, commented on was the fact that there is some wastewater monitoring done at Sprague already, but probably not for all of the things that they will need to monitor for now. So when they're getting their baseline, they may test for things that hadn't been tested for before at Sprague.
They have to really look at a wide list. You have to look at the set of chemicals from shredded cars and from other shredded metals, since they will be getting it not just from their own shredding facility, but they'll be accepting metal from all comers. If the shipping is there, they'll do it. If nobody's quality controlling those folks, as far as making sure as many of the mercury switches and things are out, then that's what's going to be in there. And then when the rain falls through that, and it's any kind of acidity that'll get some rust going and so on, it's going to be a real problem. So I think they're going to be more of a problem than DEP would like to let on.
If you're just joining us, this is a WERU News Report, and my guests today are Ron Huber and Sheila Dassett. They're both with Friends of Penobscot Bay, and Sheila is also with the Down East Lobstermen's Association. And we're doing kind of a review of different issues in Penobscot Bay. And before we go through the whole litany of following up on this dredging project and that other dredging project and GAT Chemical and everything else, moving to some proactive steps that you're both involved in with this Baykeeper project. Can you say, and if anybody has anything that they'd like to comment on or any questions for these folks, give us a call too, because this is, like I said before, an interactive news report. So the phone lines are open. It's 469-0500 if you'd like to join the discussion. So what would this Penobscot Baykeeper thing entail?
Well, it's a Baykeeper organization is one that is sort of a lightning rod for citizen complaints, for NGOs or grassroots groups that need help on fighting their local battle, their backyard that's somewhere on the bay. And being connected, the Baykeeper is connected to an entire network of them where often, if it's a Corps of Engineers permit, it's a discharge permit or something, it's the same old story wherever you are around the country. And so you get a great deal of advice on how they fought these things other places. And the idea is to work as much as you can for clean water, for clean industries, but also to work with the people that are working in water right now. One of the people I really respect, get along with, is David Jelinas, the Penobscot Bay River and Bay Pilots Association. And some of the anti-dredge folks think of him as a devil incarnate, but he's another guy who's doing a wonderful job. We haven't had any shipwrecks under his command, let's just say that. And he's a Penobscot Bay steward And anyway, my point is that there are a lot of people in the different industries here that a baykeeper has to get along with. And
Sheila Dessett, how do you see a baykeeper interacting with the people working out there in the bay?
Well, we all have the same common cause, and if we work for that, then it, with a common respect, what I mean is I've worked with the fishermen and with the shipping industry, and as long as we all know the shipping zones, where the lobster traps are, and everyone works together that way, and the baykeeper would bear the same type of respect in mind, everyone should get along just fine.
And baykeeper has to advocate. There are standards that the keeper organization set up because...
Oh, okay. So this is like an overall umbrella organization. This person would be fitting into an already existing framework.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And if you don't meet the standards, you can't use the name. As a matter of fact, they trademarked the word keeper because early on, there were some developers making AstroTurf keepers. And,
jeez.
Yes, believe it or not. And so they thought, no, that's not going to happen. And so now they have a wonderful set of standards. And they also know that baykeepers grow, that at first people know, well, contact Ron. He could find it out for you. Or contact Sheila, and then she'll pass it along to the right people. You know, that you have that, and they'll assume that you may have that connection. So over perhaps half of that bay. So they'll have baykeepers that are just, say, West Penobscot baykeeper. And then as they develop associations with people from Stonington up to Castine, then it becomes a whole baykeeper. And the thing is that you do commit to dealing with the environmental issues that are there.
All right, we're going to cut you off just for a second and take a call. We have John from Jefferson. Welcome to the program, John.
Hi. Okay, glad to hear Ron on there. I'd like the listeners to know that Ron is a really good environmentalist, is one of the most dedicated in the state, and he's running for the open seat in Rockland, and running as a Green on clean elections. I realize he can't campaign there, but I can call in and give a plug for him and ask anybody that wants to help him to do so.
Yeah, thanks for your call, John, and that's fine. We're not making it about the campaign today because we don't have the other candidates with us, but right. Yeah, that's fine to mention.
I just thought I'd mention that and keep up your good work.
Do you have any thoughts about this baykeeper thing?
I'm not really up to speed on that. I'm also concerned about this metallic mining stuff, and I'm hoping that people will not accept the limitations that apparently are being imposed, namely that you can only talk about the rules and not the basic idea of mining in Maine and what it might do for the water. I think we ought to blow that out of the water and to use a figure of speech.
You're talking about at the public hearing next week on the...
Exactly,
yeah.
Which I won't be here. I'm being out of state, but I think that we shouldn't accept those kind of limitations on testimony, especially since they're trying to ram it through. I think it's important for people to just not be meek and to be bold and say, we are the citizens, and as the Constitution of both the state and the federal government say, ultimately, citizens are sovereign collectively.
Well, thank you for your call, John. We're going to shift gears back to the baykeeper thing here.
Fine is kind. That's really a good attitude to have, is to be question authority, and question whether it's commercial or governmental authority, whoever they are.
So you were saying that there's an umbrella organization that's trademarked the name Keeper, and so if there was to be a baykeeper in Penobscot Bay, they would have to meet certain criteria?
Right. As a matter of fact, they have published a wonderful little "So You Want to Be a Baykeeper" sort of item there. And some of the important things are: are you committed to working on all the threats that could arise in your water area? Because there are stream keepers whose whole navy is a kayak. There are baykeepers that have a fleet of vessels at different parts of their bay. And everything. There's even one on a Chinese river that I think isn't allowed to have a boat. But but they keep that river.
Are any of the criteria involving how they would get along with the other people in the bay, the people who are working on the bay? Because I could see if they were seen as are you aware, Sheila, of how baykeepers in other places get along with the people working in the bay? Are they seen as a positive thing or an interference, or how does it work?
Well, we are familiar with Portland's previous baykeeper, and I believe that he is very highly respected. I haven't heard of any controversy with any baykeepers.
All right, so this isn't someone that's out there messing with the lobstermen or getting in the way.
It's finding out what their needs are as far as dealing with regulations that affect, as Sheila said, the health of these seafood species that are there and their prey and the greater natural web that's there. And
are they actually out in the bay? I have this sort of vision, I guess, of somebody being on a boat kind of cruising around in the bay and checking in with people. Is that what they actually do, or are they in an office?
Every one of them is entirely its own. Now, typically, like the Fundy baykeeper and the Casco baykeeper, you spend almost all your time going to meetings. And whether you're meeting with a commissioner or you're at a meeting of the dredge, the state dredge team, whatever it is, you're interacting with folks. And then, however, when the weather's good and also when you just want to patrol and see what's happening along, especially if you have hot spots you're watching, a bay like this, it's an expensive proposition to be patrolling with a lot of petroleum there. You do that. Now, what we are going to propose, and they haven't decided whether it's okay or not, is that since it takes a lifetime to learn your part of Penobscot Bay, very unforgiving bay in a lot of places, as far as ledge and so on goes,
fog,
that we would really like to be able to set up a system where we can deputize people ahead of time in different parts of the bay. So if there's something going on in Stonington, we can drive down there, get on a boat, and go there. Not go tooling, not spending all this time going back and forth on a vessel and wasting their time. And that way, most workboats have a 6-pack license that allows them to take other non-fishing people on board for purposes like that, and they'd be paid for their time, their time and fuel and supplies like that. But this will allow the baykeeper not to be something that has this big money hole called boats, where it's a huge and expensive burden. And if other people are holding those burdens already and can share some time on their vessel and be remunerated for it, we think that'll work just as well.
So this would be one person, and then they would deputize these other people to help them out? You're actually talking about a specific job. A baykeeper has to be
an individual. It has to be their day job. And so they have to be willing to just as Sheila deals with all the lobster-related issues, okay, this has to all the bay-related issues, and it's whether it's a coastal development project, it's something to do with mercury coming down a river that's threatening the bay. It's something to do with areas that are important for juvenile cod, for example, to hatch in, that you want to make sure that a new golf course or something isn't going to run a bunch of herbicides into that area, killing off these baby fish's food. And so you have to be on top of all the insults being put in the bay and also find some proactive things as well.
How would they be paid?
Well, they are paid a lot of different ways. The Piscataqua keeper, he's paid by Conservation Law Foundation.
And he's one that we think may be calling in during the program.
Yes.
We may hear from him. And let me just give the phone number real quick. It's, again, 469-0500 locally or 1-866-625-9378. Feel free to join in on the conversation at any point. So they have different ways of paying for them.
Yes, and so they are basically a project of Conservation Law Foundation, which actually has, I believe, several more in Massachusetts.
So you could find a environmental group that had enough money to pay for a position like this, and then they get grants or something for it?
They do that, and then the Fundy baykeeper has to go out and find money for himself. That is, he has to do the grant writing, and he has to do the hold events. What they really like is the holding events to get the public to participate. And
I wonder what percentage of that person's time that takes, though.
Well, I guess it depends on how big the party is. But
yeah, it's a lot going on down in that bay, too.
Oh, yeah. And so
there's a couple different funding routes. What are you thinking with the Penobscot baykeeper? Do you have any thoughts about how it would be funded, that position?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's a matter of going around to to the people that represent different interests around the bay and seeing if they will pool their resources. Like I said, I have no problem, getting support from something like the Penobscot River and Bay Pilots Association, because they know that we're not going to go, well, I guess we have to be pro-dredging because Jelenas likes that. No, don't. However, there are things that may be important to him that some other environs may not understand or something. So I'm not worried about that kind of thing. However, as far as from an industrial thing like GAC Chemical or someone, forget about it. People that have permits that any kind of permits that would fall under our purview obviously don't want to take a penny from.
Again, if you're just joining us, this is the WERU News Report. I'm Amy Browne here with John Greenman, who's engineering and taking your calls at 4690500. And our guests today in this segment are talking about Penobscot Bay, Penobscot Bay Keeper. We'll get back to a few more issues that are facing Penobscot Bay. They are Ron Huber and Sheila Dassett of Friends of Penobscot Bay. And as I mentioned before, Sheila Dassett is also with the Down East Lobstermen's Association. Sheila, what kind of qualifications would you like to see in a person that would be filling this kind of role as a Penobscot Bay Keeper?
It would have to be someone that understands the fishermen, understands well how the shipping industry works, as well as a good communicator with the public. Getting back quickly, I wanted to give you a quick example of one of the things that I have dealt with the fishing industry is I do get calls from concerned citizens. Last summer, I received a call from a person that was here from New York for visiting for the summer. And the first thing he was concerned about was the pesticide runoff. And so if we have a baykeeper, in this case, I called Ron and I said, well, we have people that are worried about the pesticide runoff.
Was that in a specific location or just in general?
He was in a specific location, but definitely he said he did not want to have happen to Maine what happened in Long Island, and the pesticides were so severe that, their lobster population declined dramatically. And so that's just one example of, if we had a baykeeper, I could relay these type of calls to the baykeeper, and they could follow up on these types of research.
Do they have any enforcement authority at all, or what do they do if they catch somebody doing something or they discover a problem?
Well, it's a matter, basically they document it and then alert the appropriate enforcement people. And if it's another sort of issue, they'll file a lawsuit if they're violating Clean Water Act or any of the other laws that protect nature. That's the other side of it. Now each baykeeper is different. The Casco baykeeper never did any litigation. They did research and a lot of outreach and the fine art of being diplomatic with the big businesses that are there. And other ones like the Hudson River Keeper, that's practically all they do is sue polluting businesses and force as the water there as clean as possible. And we're hoping to use something in between those, because as Sheila said, there are a lot of people on the water that know the water, that are important contacts, that when they see a problem, they know contact Sheila or contact the baykeeper. If they don't have to go, which agency person and which one can I trust? Was this person hired by Patty Aho, or is this a lifer at DEP that I know is going to be square with me? It's the baykeepers expected to know just as sports fans can tell you all about every team, every football team that they follow, and who's strong and who's weak and all that. We have to look at the same thing with all those players, as they call themselves.
So where are you at in the process now? I mean, I assume you're not advertising for this position yet because it's something that you still have yet to find funding for. Is that right? Is funding where you are in the process?
Well, what we're doing right now is we're having a series of baykeepers, existing ones, come up and give talks. They've been up in Belfast, and we had the Fundy Keeper, and then the all things being equal, we'll have the Casco Baykeeper coming up.
All things being equal, you mean winter not getting in the way?
Right. It's happened to me before. He'll be up the last Friday of February. And the Piscataqua River Keeper will also be coming up. He'll be coming up actually March, I guess it's March 3rd, the first Wednesday in March.
So these will be at the Belfast Free Library?
Yes. Well, that one won't be. I say no, he will be, the Piscataqua one. The Casco Baykeeper is we're ironing that out, but it appears that it's going to be the Unitarian Universalist Church because the Fridays are full at the library. It's movie night.
So friendsofpenobscotbay.org for details?
Yes, that'll get you a lot of details there.
Okay. Anything else we want to say about baykeepers before we move on to sort of a review of some of the issues facing the bay?
I just want to look at, there's a very short list here of baykeeper things that they're expected to do there, and some of them we've already talked about, but I'll just go through it very quickly. One's actively patrolling the watershed, boat, car, air, whatever you do. We've done all those things. As you know, we do overflights to see how the logging's going on the shore. And routine monitoring, watch the permits, the pollution permits, the discharge permits, because there's like 36 outfalls that are licensed in Penobscot Bay, and they're very mixed quality, Do litigation, regardless, as they say, of where or when or whom filed. If it's going to better the bay and it's the only route, that's what you do. Respond to calls for assistance, info, and action. Challenge decision-making that impacts the water, and that's another thing that we've learned how to do. Do cleanups or restoration projects if you can, and provide education. Encourage recreational people to be out on the bay. We hope that with the dams coming down and the alewives coming up and down and so on, that there'll be more predator large fish being residential schools that stay here year round, that people that like to have their kids or themselves learn how to recreationally fish off docks and so on haven't been able to do that since the chicken plants and other chummers came down. But now that the chlorine is largely out of the river as far as the discharges go, and dams are opening, we're expecting a much more lively bay, and we want to do everything we can both to help what's natural there, and given the fact that things are warming up, it's very likely that there may be a significant blue crab fishery in our bay. Let's get ready now, because we know that they've penetrated from the Mid-Atlantic area into the Gulf of Maine.
Do you have a time frame for when you'd like to see this on board, this person on board? Because it sounds like these things that you've just listed, these tasks, are things that individuals could do voluntarily, but to get them all under the umbrella of an official baykeeper,
right?
Is there a time frame for that?
No, there isn't, because we need to, I said, hammer the budget together and those folks there. And until that point, Friends of Penobscot Bay will continue basically carrying out these tasks just as executive director.
Informally. Okay. We do have another call. This is Diane from Liberty. Thanks for calling, Diane.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call. I hope this is going to be an appropriate question, but as far as the baykeepers go, what connection with law enforcement, such as the warden service, would there be if a baykeeper saw a violation and didn't want it to go cold before it could run through the administrative system, if it could be stopped on the spot or get evidence of what's being done and who's doing it? What is your provision for that? Thank you.
Well, thanks for your call, Diane.
Well, as a matter of fact, a baykeeper is not an agent of the court or the legal system, and it would simply be getting to know who the different enforcement people are in that area, and also who might live in that area that can zip on out to that spot and get us some evidence and all that. But baykeepers could do a citizen arrest like any citizen can, but no further.
Fine line between citizens arrest and kidnapping, so know what you're doing before you try that. Let's shift gears in the last 10 minutes here and revisit some of the issues facing the Bay. Sheila, you've been quiet. It's hard when you're on the phone line to have the discussion as fully as we could if you were here in person, but we appreciate you taking the time and joining us that way, and I want to make sure that you get a chance to say everything that you joined us to say. So if there's anything you want to add to the baykeeper thing before we move on, and then I'd like to get your thoughts about which hot topic issues in Penobscot Bay are concerning the most, are you're most concerned about? Which ones you think are the most important?
Well, as far as the baykeeper, I think that definitely is a good thing to have, because, as Ron said, some of the baykeepers are involved with research as well, and there has been discussion about possibly aquaculture out in the bay, which I think a baykeeper would also be interested in some of the research that's going on in Penobscot Bay. And some of the hot topics about Penobscot Bay for us that we have been very involved in has been the dredge project. I think a lot of people have been concerned about the dredging, and I think for people to have a common understanding of how this goes, a lot of people are definitely against it. Some people are definitely for it, and I think that communications on the reasons behind both sides of the spectrum is very important.
All right. Is there of the some of the topics that we've been reporting on for years, some of them several years now, and they're interlinked, and are the Halterchem mercury issue and the mercury that's found its way down the river into the bay. We've got the expansion dredging project, sort of on right all in the same area as the maintenance dredging project for Sprague Energy, which was more recently proposed. Whatever's in the mud there at GAT Chemical and the cleanup that they're doing voluntarily, many other things. Which of these can you give us an update on? News on any of those fronts?
Sure. GAC Chemical has been granted a VRAP project, Voluntary Remediation Action Plan. And what that does is they put together a plan for what they're doing is removing a large patch of sulfur waste that's next to the old acid plant, and walling off cutting back the shore that this acid has been leaking out into the harbor with, and putting in geotextile cloth and other things to stop that leak, and then installing a trench that'll have limestone and have to be replenished regularly until the stuff stops coming out. They're hoping that digging out this one major area will put an end to the stuff, more acid being produced. And
will they be cleaning up? When we did the walkthrough of the area the summer before last, there were those balls of sulfur and broken ceramic
that's the material
pipes
that's been coming out of the out of that.
Are they going to
sulfur
clean
waste.
up what's already out that's in the mud there?
Well, I suspect so, because already they have a crew every week that goes out and picks up ceramics and other industrial junk that's there.
John Greenman wanted to jump in.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Ron and Sheila, I wonder if either of you know what would happen. Presently, the town of Orland is considering getting rid of its dam, which is just on the border of the bay. I mean, if it does that, the Narragansett River and the Orland River would just drain right into the bay. What are the potential effects of that?
Well, the positive effect of it is as it is with any coastal stream, and that would be access again to between the salt water and the fresh up there, because dams are pretty absolute. If it's the one I'm thinking of that had an old industrial plant next to a dam that's on it,
I don't think
I'm
so.
not sure. No, it's just downriver from the bridge in Orland, the town of Orland.
Well, it would. It is carrying a lot of history in the muds behind it. That's the big issue with dams, is that depending on when it's built, you may have all the different waste from the 19th and 20th centuries all settling right there, because water slows the dam, precipitates. So you have to remove that stuff before you break open a dam, or else you're going to send this big slug of waste down into the coastal waters there, and you don't want to do that. So it could be expensive to dig that stuff out. You have to coffer dam it, and hopefully it's muddy enough you can use a suction type system and not have to have an expensive dredger clawing away at it.
Well,
as far as we know, though, in Orland, as far as we know, the only settled earth in that particular place would be sediment coming from Alamoosic Lake and the Orland River. There's no industry except for the federal fish hatchery, which is in Alamoosic Lake.
Well, that has a fascinating history all its own there.
Yeah, we've done reports on that as well. And I think that's something that would warrant a show all of its own at some point.
If
we have anybody out there who is, hold on a second, if you have anybody out there who knows the history of the dams or wants to recommend somebody who does, there's a lot of different issues with the dams and the water aqueduct into Bucksport and the Bucksport drinking supply and what's happening now that the mill has been sold. But sorry, Ron, go ahead.
That's
We've
all
got
right.
just about 2 minutes left.
Okay. Well, let me just let people know how to contact us and so on first as well there, and that would be coastwatch@gmail.com. Is it good email? coastwatch@gmail.com, and penobscotbay.blogspot.com is our blog, and facebook.com/penobscotbay. All my grammar teachers are going, no, that's 2 words. Well, and nowadays that's 1 word.
Everything's,
And please be in touch, because the one thing is that the Friends of Penobscot Bay absolutely relies on people saying, we got a problem here or problem there, or we need some info here or there. It can help. If we don't know, can't deal with it until you see an article of something that's been approved.
All right. Let's, Sheila, I have one last thing I need to say before we wrap up, but I want you to have the last word on this topic. Do you have anything that you would like to add before we finish up?
Well, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me on the show. And as Ron said, please contact us at any time, because we won't know unless people, communicate with us. And we're very happy to help.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. And we didn't get to even half of the topics on Penobscot Bay, so we'll have to do this again and get another update. Ron Huber and Sheila Dassett of Friends of Penobscot Bay. I also want to announce that tomorrow, Radioactive, which is normally a half-hour program from 4:30 to 5, is going to be a special hour-long edition. Meredith DeFrancesco, the host, will be speaking with the Penobscot Nation Chief Kirk Francis about the Environmental Protection Agency's new directive to the state of Maine to strengthen water quality standards for tribal waters. The decision recognizes the protection of sustenance fishing rights under the Federal Clean Water Act. And also, she'll be doing a segment on the fast-moving and legally controversial resurgence of the legislation aimed at relaxing Maine's metallic mining regulations prior to the public hearing before the Joint Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. It'll be taking place next Wednesday, the 25th at the State House. I believe that starts at 9 o'clock, but you can go to maine.gov to be sure. But that program will be on tomorrow from 4 to 5 o'clock on Radioactive. You have been listening to the WERU News Report. We are now on Wednesdays from 4 to 5, so make a note. Join us next week. It's an interactive news program, although we didn't have many calls today. We do thank the people who did call in and encourage you to make a note of it. Call in next week. And thank John Greenman, who engineered for us today. Stay tuned. We've got Democracy Now! Coming up next here on your community radio station, WERU-FM, 89.9 Blue Hill, 99.9 Bangor, and streaming online at weru.org. I'm Amy Browne. Thanks for listening.
Support for WERU comes from Maine Farmland Trust, a member-supported, non-profit organization focused on reviving the working landscape and securing a future for farming in Maine. More information on protecting farmland and supporting farmers at mainefarmlandtrust.org.